The forest did not belong to the soldiers. That is the first thing worth remembering. Even in daylight, the towering pines of the Hürtgen Forest seemed to bend inward as if trying to shut out the sky. They had stood there long before nations quarreled over borders and land, long before young men carried rifles onto soil that was never meant for them. War raged across Europe in 1944, but inside this forest, something far older stood guard. Our story begins with a patrol from the United States 28th Infantry Division, a unit already battered by relentless combat. The air carried a heavy chill, mixed with the smell of damp earth and gun oil. These men were exhausted beyond anything they could have imagined when they first signed their names on enlistment papers back home. Home, a concept that felt like a half-remembered dream now. Their boots sunk into the soft ground as they moved in staggered formation, scanning the shadows between the trees. Private William Carter tried to focus on the sounds around him, though his heartbeat pounded loud enough to drown everything else out. He was the youngest in the group, just 20 years old, and still clinging to a fading belief that this war would end before it swallowed him whole. The squad leader, Sergeant Mason Reeves, walked ahead with a calmness that the others envied. His face looked chiseled from stone, but even stone can crack under the right pressure. The only source of light came from a pale and distant moon, struggling to reach the forest floor. Fog coiled tightly around the trees, as if trying to shut out any sense of direction. That fog was a predator, hiding what lurked beneath it. Every few steps, one of the men would glance behind them. Their nerves weren't just frayed, they were shredded. Carter felt it first, a prickling sensation crawling up the back of his neck like icy fingers. He paused. In any other moment, he would have told himself it was just nerves, a trick played by fear. Except the forest had gone perfectly silent. Not the silence of peace, but of things hiding, things holding their breath. Reeves raised a fist, signaling the men to stop. Everyone froze in place. They listened. Nothing. No wind, no birds, not a single branch shifting. That is when the feeling deepened, the certainty that someone or something watched them from behind. Carter slowly turned his head, trying not to draw attention with sudden movement, though he had no idea who or what he feared drawing attention from. At first, there was only darkness stitched between the trees, a solid blackness where moonlight refused to go. Then his eyes adjusted. A shape far too big to be a man. It stood upright, tall as the trees surrounding it. Its form barely registered against the night, not quite defined by lines or edges. It was like the absence of light had taken shape and begun to move. No face, no details, only void. A giant shadow. Carter's mouth dried. His breathing turned shallow. He blinked, hoping that would erase the image. It didn't. The moment he tried to whisper, the shadow shifted. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. It leaned slightly forward, acknowledging him, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment. Carter's stomach dropped. He stumbled backwards, boots crunching leaves and breaking the silence like shattered glass. Reeves whipped around, expression tight. "Carter, what?" His voice died. He saw it too. One by one, every soldier in the patrol turned to face the darkness. Their hearts thrashed inside their chests, screaming at them to run. No training manual had prepared them for this. Then the shadow moved again, slow, deliberate, tracking them. Reeves snapped out of his trance with a harsh whisper. "Move, quietly, now." No one questioned him. They pressed forward deeper into the forest, away from the shape that did not belong to the world they knew. The forest seemed to tilt around them. Fog twisted in unnatural patterns. Every soldier checked over his shoulder more times than he could count. The shadow remained behind them, gliding more than walking, always the same distance away,
as though it followed on invisible rails. If they slowed, it slowed. If they turned, it turned. A living shadow that refused to be shaken. Private Daniel Harlow, the oldest in the group and a father of two, muttered under his breath, voice trembling, "We're not alone. We're not alone out here." No one contradicted him. They pushed forward deeper into unfamiliar terrain. Fear crawled under their skin and made a home there. The forest pressed closer. The moon dipped lower. Cold crept through their bones as if to remind them that dawn was a luxury they may not live to see. Reeves signaled for a halt near a cluster of fallen logs, motioning them into defensive positions. They collapsed behind low cover, trembling. Carter dared one glance behind. The shadow didn't stand still anymore. It was closer. The fog slithered aside to reveal a towering outline that stretched upward like a nightmare tree come to life. And yet no sound, no footsteps, just presence. It did not belong here. The soldiers did not belong here. These were two worlds that should never intersect, but something ancient and cruel had forced their meeting. Reeves tried to stay composed, but fear cracked his voice like thin ice. "What do you want?" he whispered to the dark. The giant figure did not respond. It simply watched, as though waiting for the right moment to show its true shape. Suddenly, something snapped deep in the woods, a sharp, unnatural crack that ricocheted through the valley. Every soldier flinched. The shadow drifted backwards into the trees and vanished, completely, as if it had never existed at all. The forest came alive again. The wind returned first, pushing branches into a restless sway. Then the distant calls of night creatures resumed, hesitant at first, then louder, bolder. The silence had been lifted. Yet no one felt relief. The soldiers sat frozen, staring at the spot where the being had disappeared. Their breathing remained ragged. Their fingers clutched rifles like lifelines. Reeves leaned closer to Carter, voice hoarse, eyes open. "We're getting out of here before sunrise." Because they understood something too terrifying for words. Things in that forest obeyed the night. The night was far from over. As they prepared to move again, each man shared the same dreadful thought, though none dared to speak it. The shadow wasn't gone. It was only letting them go, for now. What hunted them had not lost interest. It had simply decided the chase wasn't finished. The war outside the forest was brutal. The war inside the forest was different. It was ancient, personal. It followed them, step by step. Every soldier wondered the same thing. What happens when the shadow decides to finally catch up?
The patrol moved with the quiet desperation of men who knew time was no longer their ally. There was no chatter now, no whispers, only the rhythmic crunch of boots and the occasional metallic click of fingers adjusting their grips on rifles slick with cold sweat. Fear had a weight to it, and each soldier carried that burden like an overloaded pack digging into the shoulders of their sanity. The Hürtgen Forest stretched endlessly around them, its darkness swallowing the last slivers of moonlight. That place had already consumed thousands of soldiers, not just through gunfire or artillery, but through something just as deadly, despair. The Germans didn't have to kill American troops here. The forest did that for them. Reeves' mind raced as he led the group north toward what he hoped was the front line. His sense of direction felt compromised by panic. Yet he refused to show doubt because doubt was contagious. If he let it spread, he would lose his men long before bullets ever found them. Carter tried to stay directly behind the sergeant, but every few yards he would look over his shoulder. The fog made the trees shimmer like silhouettes of waiting giants. His imagination filled every gap with dread. That massive figure they saw earlier felt like the embodiment of war itself, cold, relentless, watching. Private Harlow whispered a nervous prayer under his breath. He had been raised in a quiet church where faith was simple, a comforting constant. The forest twisted that comfort into something fragile. Every time he ended a sentence, he wondered if God could hear anything in here. Corporal Davison was the skeptic. He had always scoffed at ghost stories told around the barracks back home. Now he kept his finger on the trigger, jaw clenched so tightly he feared his teeth might crack. His mind clung to logic even as the world around him defied it. The patrol pressed on, guided by Reeves' quiet hand signals. Then the trees parted just enough to reveal a clearing choked with the remains of war. Shattered wood, burned out craters, the wreckage of what once might have been an armored vehicle lay rusted and torn open like a grave. Reeves raised his fist again. The men halted. Something was wrong. The silence returned. Not natural silence, smothering silence, predatory silence. A low rumble rolled through the ground beneath their feet. It felt like distant thunder trapped underground. Carter crouched lower, eyes darting wildly. "What now?" Davison murmured, barely audible. Reeves didn't answer. He was too busy watching the fog as it shifted, responding to something moving toward them. The rumble grew stronger. The trees shivered. Carter's mouth ran dry. Then, all at once, that towering shape emerged again at the far side of the clearing. Its presence bent the world around it. It wasn't simply walking into view. It was replacing what existed there before, consuming the darkness to make room for itself. The patrol scrambled into defensive positions, rifles raised. No one fired. They didn't know if bullets could even touch something like this. The shadow considered them for a long, agonizing moment. It didn't breathe. It didn't sway. It simply existed. Wrong in every way a thing could be wrong. Reeves forced air into his lungs. "Identify yourself," he barked, though even he didn't believe the thing understood language. The shadow responded, not with words, but with movement. Its head dipped ever so slightly, acknowledging them like prey caught in the open. Then its arms, long, impossibly long, began to stretch outward, forming shapes that flickered in and out of the fog. It seemed to expand with each breathless second. Carter's knees wobbled. He had never felt so small. Suddenly, Reeves made a decision. The kind of decision a leader makes when cornered between duty and survival. Fall back, now. The soldiers didn't argue. They sprinted into the tree line. Branches whipped against their faces and uniforms as they stumbled through the dark. Carter turned his head while running. The shadow glided after them without haste. It didn't need speed. It simply absorbed distance. Every time Carter blinked, it was closer. Davison fired a burst. The bullets vanished into the creature like pebbles thrown into an abyss. No reaction, no impact. The forest became chaos. Roots tripped them. Bones from forgotten battles cracked underfoot. The soldiers gasped for breath, lungs pleading for relief. The patrol reached a steep embankment that dropped down into a gully. Reeves didn't hesitate. He slid down the hillside, mud spraying from his boots. The others followed, tumbling and scrambling until they reached the bottom in a bruised heap. For a moment, they thought they had lost it. Then the fog above them thickened, darkened, congealed into a descending mass. The shadow was no longer a distant watcher. It had come to hunt. Panic shattered discipline. The squad scattered like deer under a hunter's sightline. Reeves tried to call them back, but fear drowned his voice. Carter sprinted deeper into the gully, heart exploding in his chest. He heard Harlow scream behind him, a raw, gutting sound that cut through the night. Carter looked back. Harlow was gone. Just gone. One moment a man, the next, swallowed by darkness as if the earth opened and devoured him. Carter's legs nearly let out. Tears blurred his vision. He stumbled through the chaos, calling names he could barely force past his trembling lips. "Sarge, Davison, anyone?" The forest echoed nothing back. The shadow didn't need to rush. It already owned the night. It already owned their fear. It was simply deciding who to take next.
For a fleeting second, Carter wondered if maybe death by gunfire would have been kinder. At least bullets belong to the living. This thing belonged to something humanity was never meant to understand. Up ahead, he saw a faint glow, light, hope. He pushed toward it with everything left in him. Reeves' voice called from ahead, sharp and urgent. This way. Move. Carter hurled himself toward the sergeant. Together they plunged through underbrush until the ground leveled out. A series of faint lanterns flickered in the distance. German-made. Maybe a forward aid station. Maybe another nightmare. Reeves grabbed Carter by the collar, dragging him into a shallow dugout. Quiet, he hissed. They huddled there, chests heaving, trying not to cry. Above them, the fog twisted through the trees like searching fingers. Reeves steadied his rifle, even though he knew deep down it meant nothing. Carter whispered, voice breaking apart. "Sarge, what is it?" Reeves didn't look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on the creeping darkness overhead. "I've been in this war long enough to know everything bleeds. Everything dies. That thing doesn't." The dugout shook as the shadow passed directly over them. The air grew impossibly cold. Something ancient brushed the edges of their minds, whispering a thought neither wanted to accept. "You are not meant to be here." Then, suddenly, silence again. Not relief, the silence of a predator, pausing, choosing. Reeves forced his breathing to slow. He whispered, "We wait till daylight. That's our only chance." The forest groaned like a living chest expanding and contracting around them. Carter pressed his forehead against the dirt, shutting his eyes tight. He prayed this time too, not for victory, not for heroism, for one more sunrise. He didn't know if the shadow feared daylight. He only hoped it did. Because if the sun failed to save them, nothing else would. The night stretched onward, hunting them second by excruciating second. War had shown these men cruelty. Now it showed them something far worse.
The night refused to move forward. Every minute felt like an hour, and the forest's oppressive dark lingered with a dreadful patience. Carter curled into himself, arms wrapped around his knees, trying not to picture what could be waiting just beyond the lip of the dugout. His teeth chattered, but not from the cold. Fear did things to the human body no winter could match. Reeves stayed upright, back to the mud wall, rifle ready in his hands. He didn't blink enough. Every muscle locked as if he expected the shadows to suddenly flood into the trench. He had been a leader long enough to know that terror spread like infection. So he swallowed his own terror and forced his breathing into a steady rhythm. For Carter's sake. For his sake too. A branch snapped somewhere above. Reeves pressed a finger to his lips. Carter's breath caught. The forest responded with another sharp crack, then another. Something walked the treetops like a massive animal stalking from above, yet there was no tremor, no bending of limbs to show its weight. The presence pressed down on their backs like a heavy hand. Reeves whispered so quietly Carter barely caught the words. "Stay alive. That's the mission now." They waited. Minutes or hours passed. The men inside the dugout could no longer judge the flow of time. When exhaustion finally tugged at Carter's eyelids, the first hints of dawn bled into the sky. Not much, just a softening of darkness. Gray pushing back black. A thin promise. Reeves nudged Carter. "Move. We stick to the low ground. Save your strength." The soldiers climbed out of the dugout, shoulders screaming from the strain of staying tense too long. The forest around them looked different in the weakening dark, less like a tomb, for now. But the thing that followed them had not left. It watched from where night lingered longest, where morning light dared not yet enter. The shadow stood still as an ancient monument, formed again from the fog, as though it had never left. It faced them directly, Even without a face, they felt it stare, felt judged. Carter felt his throat tighten. Daylight doesn't stop it. No. But daylight means we can run faster. They moved, fast. The ground softened with morning dew. Branches slapped their uniforms as they crashed through the underbrush. Carter ignored every ache, every burning muscle. Survival pushed everything else aside. The deeper they went, the more war returned to the land around them. Abandoned helmets, spent casings, the cracked remains of a howitzer sprawled like a broken Titan, a torn American flag tangled in branches, dirty but still fluttering with stubborn defiance. Signs of the familiar world, the human war. Reeves checked his compass. We're close. Less than a mile from our lines if this is right. Carter nodded, forcing hope to take root again. Harlow should have been with them, too. Davidson. Every step towards safety reminded them of the men absorbed into the dark. Men who had families waiting. Men who had plans after the war. Reeves carried that weight like a stone inside his chest. Leadership meant tallying the souls you failed to bring home. The forest began to thin. Shafts of sunlight finally speared through the trees. Carter's heart lifted. They pushed harder. Then, a scream. Davidson. It came from behind them, from a patch of shadows so deep daylight refused to penetrate it. The scream rose, then cut short. Silence swallowed everything again. Carter staggered. His entire being screamed to go back for Davidson. Reeves grabbed his arm before he could move. We can't. We go back, none of us leave. Carter's eyes watered, chest shaking. We can't just leave him, Sarge. We already lost him. Reeves didn't hide the pain in his voice. That hurt more than the words themselves. The shadows surged forward, cutting the distance between them in a single monstrous glide. No footsteps, no warning, just hunger. Reeves fired anyway, every round a desperate plea for impossible salvation. Keep moving, he shouted, voice cracking. Carter ran faster than he ever had. The trees blurred. The world narrowed to one goal: sunlight. Ahead, barbed wire gleamed like salvation. Beyond it, American voices, a watchtower rising above the tree line. Their lines, their people. Reeves let out a shout, half laughter, half sob. We made it! Carter stumbled into the clearing, lungs burning, tears streaking his face. He waved frantically toward the outpost. Friendly, don't shoot! Soldiers in helmets swung rifles toward them, then recognized the American uniforms. Hands motioned wildly for the two survivors to come in. Relief hit Carter so hard he nearly collapsed. Reeves slowed his pace just before crossing into the camp's protective perimeter. He turned back. The shadow stood at the tree line. It no longer hid. It no longer chased. It simply watched. From a place the sun refused to fully own. Daylight didn't destroy it. It only kept it at bay. Reeves stared into that faceless void. He understood something then, something cold and permanent. Some entities didn't care who won the war. They were older than bullets, older than nations. They didn't haunt battlegrounds because of spilled blood. Battlegrounds sat on their land. Carter tugged Reeves forward. Sarge, come on! Reeves turned away. The soldiers reached them, grabbing their arms and dragging them inside the perimeter. Medics rushed over with water and questions. Carter collapsed into the dirt, shaking uncontrollably. Reeves stood, eyes fixed on the forest where the nightmare lingered like a patient hunter. One of the guards noticed his stare. Something out there? Reeves answered with a tremor in his voice that refused to hide. There's something in that forest that ain't human. It follows the night. The guard frowned,
trying to peer into the gloom. The shadow shifted, even in broad daylight. Reeves clenched his fist. "Don't go in there after dark. Don't ever go in there." Later, when finally allowed to rest inside a fortified bunker, Carter asked a quiet question that carried every tremor in his soul. "Sarge, do you think it's done with us?" Reeves didn't look at him. He stared up at the ceiling, eyes wide and sleepless. "No, it knows us now." He turned his head slightly, voice low as a funeral bell. "When night falls again, it will come looking." Carter knew he couldn't go home and pretend everything was normal again. The creature's memory would stretch across oceans, across years, across whatever future he might get. There are battles a rifle can't win. There are enemies that stay with you long after the war ends. The soldiers in that camp would hear strange noises the next night. Whispered footsteps beyond the wire, shapes that moved where light dared not yet enter. They'd strengthen their guard and pray. The shadow never learned how to cross the line between their world and theirs. War leaves scars inside a man. Everyone knew that. What followed those soldiers home was not a scar. It was a presence. The Hürtgen Forest never forgot them, and the shadow never stops hunting. The war ended. Their nightmare didn't.